Over 50 dogs have mysteriously leapt to their deaths from Overton Bridge. A diver's body was found deep inside the Great Blue Hole years after they vanished. These aren't stories from horror films. They're real events tied to some of the world's most haunted places. Some locations carry dark histories, eerie legends, and an energy that lingers long after the living have left. If you ever find yourself near one, you might want to think twice before stepping closer. Most cultures bury or cremate their dead, but the people of Sagada in the Philippines follow a different tradition. They suspend coffins on the sides of cliffs. For nearly 500 years, this ritual has remained an important part of their culture. The elderly carve their own coffins from hollowed logs. If they are too weak or ill, their families prepare the coffins instead. Once the person passes, the body is carefully placed inside, even if it means breaking bones to fit them in. The burial process is not just a quiet ceremony. It begins with a gathering led by the deceased's family and relatives. Days of mourning take place, along with the butchering of livestock and preparing the body for its final resting place. A family member then carries the body to the cave or cliff, where the coffin is waiting. People believe this act transfers luck, blessings, and talents from the deceased to the family. The reason for hanging coffins comes from the belief that the higher the dead are placed, the closer they are to their ancestors and the heavens. Some of these coffins have been suspended for over a century, but over time they deteriorate and fall from their precarious positions. These burial sites, particularly in Sagada's Echo Valley, are difficult to reach and should be left undisturbed out of respect. But they can still be seen from a distance, serving as a haunting reminder of an ancient tradition that refuses to fade away. Would you dare to stand beneath them? Hanging coffins may be unsettling, but what if the dead weren't the only ones trapped in a place? Beneath the streets of Edinburgh, something still lingers in the darkness. In the late 1700s, the Edinburgh Vaults were built beneath South Bridge. At first, they were nothing more than storage spaces and workshops for businesses above. But as time passed, the vaults took on a much darker purpose. When the businesses left, the city's poorest residents moved in. With nowhere else to go, they turned the vaults into a hidden world of crime and misery. The chambers were cold, damp, and completely cut off from sunlight. People lived in absolute darkness, struggling to survive. Desperation turned the vaults into a haven for illegal activity. Gambling rings and smuggling operations thrived. Criminals ran brothels, thieves hid stolen goods, and rumors spread of even worse crimes. Some whispered that the vaults became a hunting ground for body snatchers, men who stole fresh corpses to sell to medical schools. Eventually, conditions became so unbearable that the vaults were sealed off and forgotten. For over a century, they sat in silence, hidden beneath the streets of Edinburgh. Then, in the 1980s, they were rediscovered. Today, visitors can walk through the abandoned chambers on guided tours. But those who enter should be careful. Many believe the souls of those who suffered there never left. Shadows move in the corners. Disembodied voices echo through the halls. Some visitors have reported feeling sudden chills or being touched by unseen hands. The vaults may no longer house criminals or the desperate, but something still lingers in the darkness. The vaults of Edinburgh hold echoes of the past, but some places not only hold spirits, they draw the living to their deaths. Overton Bridge in Scotland looks like a peaceful historic structure. Workers completed its construction in the 1890s, and for decades it remained an ordinary crossing. But something disturbing started happening. Dogs began leaping off the bridge to their deaths. This pattern continued for years, and locals started calling it the Bridge of Death. One Sunday afternoon, a man was walking his dog across the bridge. Without warning, the dog ran to the edge and jumped. The owner stood in shock, unable to understand what had just happened. One tragic event might seem like a terrible accident, but this kept happening. Reports confirmed that over 50 dogs had jumped in the past 50 years. Some believe the scent of animals below lures them over the edge. Others think something paranormal is controlling them. This bridge becomes even darker when considering a horrifying event that happened in October 1994. A man threw his newborn son over the edge, believing the child was the devil himself. The baby had a birthmark, and the father became convinced that dark forces surrounded him. He later admitted that he chose Overton Bridge because of its supernatural energy and evil presence. No one has proven the cause, but the risk is real. If you ever visit, keep your dog on a tight leash. Overton Bridge may call to those on land, but deep beneath the ocean, another place exists where people vanish without a trace. Off the coast of Belize, a massive underwater sinkhole known as the Great Blue Hole has lured divers from around the world. It stretches over 1,000 feet wide and plunges more than 400 feet deep. From above, it looks like a perfect circle of deep blue water surrounded by a shallow reef. But beneath the surface, it hides deadly secrets. Many experienced divers have attempted to explore its depths. Some never made it back. In 2019, an expedition reached the bottom and discovered something chilling. Two bodies of long-lost divers who had disappeared years earlier. The deeper one goes, the more dangerous the conditions become. At the bottom, a thick layer of hydrogen sulfide creates a deadly barrier. Life cannot survive in this toxic zone. Crabs that wander too deep suffocate before they can escape. For humans, a single miscalculation can mean getting lost in the darkness, with no way back to the surface. The Great Blue Hole remains one of the most beautiful yet treacherous dive sites in the world. It offers adventure, but only for those willing to risk everything. The ocean hides its secrets, but some places wear their darkness in plain sight. A ruined lodge, a violent past, and a group that may have welcomed something truly sinister. Montpelier Hill wasn't always a place of fear. Long before its ruins stood in eerie silence, an ancient burial site rested at the top. A passage grave covered by a pile of stones had been there for centuries. Then, in 1725, William Speaker Connolly arrived. One of the richest men in Ireland, he built a hunting lodge right on top of the grave. He destroyed the site and even took one of the grave's standing stones and used it as part of his fireplace. Not long after, a storm ripped through the area. The wind howled, and the roof of the lodge was torn away. Locals believed that angry spirits had struck back, furious over the destruction of their resting place. And so, the stories began. The lodge changed hands after Connolly's death, and over time, a secretive group moved in, the Irish Hellfire Club. Founded by Richard Parsons in 1735, its members were wealthy, reckless, and fascinated by the occult. They met in hidden locations across Dublin, but Montpelier Hill became their most infamous gathering spot. Behind its stone walls, they indulged in heavy drinking, bizarre rituals, and wild behavior. Rumors spread. Some claimed they worshipped the devil. Others said they performed dark rituals and sacrifices. The club's leader, known as the King of Hell, dressed the part with horns, hooves, and all. They even left an empty chair at every meeting, hoping the devil himself would join them. One night, a stranger arrived. He joined the members in a game of cards, blending into the group. But when a player dropped a card and bent down to pick it up, he froze. The stranger's feet weren't feet at all. They were cloven hooves. In an instant, he vanished, leaving behind only the smell of sulfur. Another time, a young farmer grew curious. He had heard the stories and wanted to see for himself. He climbed Montpelier Hill and made his way inside. The club members let him stay, allowing him to witness whatever happened that night. By morning, he was found trembling in terror, unable to speak. He never recovered. Then there was the night of the black cat. A visitor arrived at a local farmhouse, desperate to uncover the truth about the club. The next morning, he was dead. The priest and his host, believing something sinister had happened, climbed up to Montpelier Hill. Inside the lodge, they found a feast laid out, untouched. A massive black cat prowled the room. Its ears were shaped like horns, and its presence felt wrong. The priest carried holy water and, without hesitation, performed an exorcism. The beast let out a terrible shriek before collapsing. Outside, the host was found lying on the ground, deep claw marks covering his face and neck. The Hellfire Club didn't last forever. The lodge eventually burned, leaving behind the ruins that stand today. But people say the energy never left. Strange smells linger in the air and shadows move in the corners. Some believe the rituals never stopped. The world is filled with places that seem frozen in time, holding on to their dark secrets. Some are marked by tragedy. others by eerie legends. But all share one thing: an unsettling presence that lingers long after the living have left. If you ever find yourself near one of them, remember that some doors, once opened, can never be closed.